I discovered that you really like the Pursuit of Happiness film. And it's one of the best films for me because first of all, it's true story. And secondly, it's one like inspiring, successful story. He lived misery actually. So can you tell us what really inspired you in this book? In this film, I'm sorry, and did this film help you to maybe write the book, to get some ideas?
Yeah, so I watched it a long time ago. I haven't watched it maybe I watched it again more recently, but still a long time ago. The Pursuit of Happiness is a film that embodies the American dream. And I think the American dream is a nice thing. It's not a negative thing. It's not just American, of course. They like to put their name to it. It's just the dream of going from rags to riches or becoming self-made. But it is a bit more American than other places because America is a new country relative to, Europe, Middle East, Asia. Um, and it was a self-selected sample of people who wanted to. I'm talking about the Europeans, who were the black people were not self-selected, unfortunately, for most of them. But the European people that went, they're self-selected for people who wanted to take a risk, wanted to have an adventure, who were more entrepreneurial, who were more proactive, who were less risk averse. And then they arrived and they created a new country. And it has a lot of problems and a lot of flaws, of course. But in terms of having fewer social barriers, less ingrained social class, class system, it's true to an extent. They still have a class system. They pretend they don't. Of course, they still do. But less than other countries. And because they're new, that's why. So there is more opportunity. And also, it's a big, big place. And also, it's a huge, huge market. So if you want to do something, if what you're focusing on is money, it's probably a great place to go to if you have a bit of, a bit of talent or a bit of hard work, a bit of education. It's great. You get better salaries, you get bigger houses, you get better quality of life than here in Europe. I'm in London. And so that's a lot to talk about in terms of America. But they also have, and this is in the book as well, they also have a mindset. So that's a positive thing. The negative side of that is that instead of, in general, this is a big generalization, but instead of looking at the poor and saying, oh, you are very unfortunate, we should help you in some way, we should give you some welfare, some safety net. Instead, they say, you're lazy, you don't work hard enough, you're losers. This is a quote from a philosopher called Alain de Botton. He's a Swiss, French, Jewish, British. There's a lot there. He talks about, he has a very nice quote, and it's something to do with the fact that in the Middle Ages, let's say hundreds of years ago, in Britain, and the same in Europe, when you look at poor people, you say, oh, those are unfortunates. But in America, you look at poor people and you say, those are losers. And that's a really horrible way of looking at things. But in a way, that's part of the American thinking. Now we go back to the Pursuit of Happiness. The Pursuit of Happiness is a phrase, I think, from their constitution or declaration. I don't know the details, but something to do with America. They have this phrase, the life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Something like this, one of their phrases for America. So the Pursuit of Happiness is part of the American myth, the American vision, the American dream. So the name of the movie is that. What is the movie? The movie and the story, it's a real story, is of a black poor man who's struggling, doesn't have any qualifications. He's so bad at one point that he's crying in the toilet, sleeping in the bathroom of a train station with his son. It's so sad. It's like one of the saddest films.
Yeah.
But the ending of the film is that he finally succeeds. Mm-hmm. So in a way, this message is, yes, it's difficult, but those who deserve it will get success. Kind of, that's the message of the film. But if you look at the film in another way, why was it so difficult for him? It shouldn't have been so difficult for him. That's another way to look at the film. And another way to look at it is also he's an exception. Most people do not come out of. So you're probably referring to my TED talk. That's the only time I referred to that film, but this is the first time I discussed it in an interview. So this is really cool. I was saying that if you look at the statistics, the chances of going from the poorest 20% of society to the richest 20% of society, so from rags to riches, from very poor to very rich, is actually much lower in America. Or not much lower. It's lower. It's lower in America than in Europe. A lot of the European countries. And you would think it's the opposite. And I think people find this surprising. And I talk to some of my friends are entrepreneurs who are lived in America, and they're surprised of this fact. And they say, well, to be honest, maybe it's easier to go from middle to top in America. And I think that's true. But maybe from the bottom, that's where they struggle. So America's quite sad in that it has a lot of, if you go to American cities, they have a lot more homeless people than here in Europe. They have a lot more, people with mental health issues. You can see these homeless people, they have mental health issues or their drug addiction. And they're sort of, it's kind of like, again, they're losers rather than unfortunates. That's a huge generalization, but that's the general psyche. So all of this to say, this is what I feel about The Pursuit of Happiness. I have mixed feelings. Also, it's a very sad film. It's only happy right at the end.
Yeah, I think, but I admit that I never think about this film like the way you explain it. Like for me, it was wow, from misery to success and all of that. But yeah, I didn't know that. That American people think like, they are losers, and more, in the European side, they say, unfortunate.
It's very it's based on the myth of meritocracy. If you want to go further, the idea is that America is a meritocracy, more so than other countries. And again, I think that's true. So I want to defend America here to a certain extent in terms of like, there are a lot of benefits to that, but it's just about the balance. How do you get the balance right? I love America in this aspect of people are optimistic. People are growth mindset. People take risks, people are, but at the same time, they work too much probably. We would see them, especially you're in France. They don't have vacation days. They don't have good holidays. They don't have good support. They just work a lot. Pros and cons. This has pros and cons. Depends on what you want from life. But this idea of the meritocracy, that's why most of the self-development books are American. Most business books are American. Most motivational speakers are American. This is a trend. So this is both a pro and a con. And of course, not everyone in America thinks that way. This is just a broad generalization of how culture has developed in America, how politics, culture, this idea of freedom, pursuit of happiness, the idea of not having a class system, the idea of respecting somebody self-made. I remember speaking to people in Dubai, Arabs in Dubai. One of them was a self-made multimillionaire. And he said, when I'm sitting with other rich Arabs, I realize that I shouldn't mention that I grew up homeless. Because when I mention it, they lose respect for me. Okay. They look down on me. They say, oh, like this, because he doesn't come from a rich family. So they don't respect being self-made as much not just in the Middle East, in the old world, compared to America, that's much more respected to be self-made. Do you see what I mean? So they have this mindset of like coming. The new world mindset is that your family, you're not going to be respected because your father was rich to an extent. Now, of course, Trump's father was rich. Trump made a lot of his money because of his family money. But in general, again, there's a bit of a difference in how they view things. And they have this belief that anybody can do it. And so when they see somebody driving a really expensive car, in the old world, let's say, they look on him and they say, he's a show off. He's not a nice person. We don't like him. In America, they're like, yeah, maybe one day I'll get that car too. So it's a different mindset, completely different. So it's almost like one of the other ways of looking at the book is it's kind of a way of saying it's going too far a little bit. There's the myth of meritocracy, the myth of hard work, the myth of the American dream, and we need to bring it back to reality. And the reality is that there are unfair advantages. The reality is that having a wealthy family helps, having a family name, being even in America, they have the Rockefellers, the Kennedys. They have families which are very like respected and old money. So yeah, this is the kind of thing that I wanted to emphasize in the book. And I know that's a long answer, but it's a fun discussion about the whole philosophy of the movies like The Pursuit of Happiness, the idea of the American dream, the myth of meritocracy. Where does luck and hard work play a role? These are all the things.
Thank you so much for this answer. It was really interesting, and I discovered some things that I didn't know. So thank you so much. Like, what is the advice that you can tell people, in order to reach their goals, even if they are facing difficulties in their lives? Where is the advice that you can give them?
I think that you have to understand, first of all, that you're always going to have some difficulties in life. And also understand that just because if you become financially successful, let's just talk about financial first of all, that doesn't mean your problems go away. So you will always have difficulties, and everybody faces difficulties to a certain extent. And you have to be able to push through them and persist to be able to get what you want. And you might not get exactly what you want. You might get more. You might get more, you might get less. You never know. But you have to try. You have to have faith. You have to be grateful. You have to identify your unfair advantages and keep trying. And that's the most important thing to do, because otherwise, that's the only thing that will keep you going.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I think also the mindset right here is very, very important, because you can find a rich person with a poor mindset and he would never succeed. Whether you can find someone else like a poor person, but he's trying to be positive, trying to have a great mindset. So I think the mindset right here really, and I see it around me in my environment when I talk with people. I see some people like, let's say right here we find also being grateful. They don't see all the positive things in their life. They just are so pessimist and think negatively. And so that's, also important thing is the mindset, I think.
100%. Mindset is huge, and there's a section on it in the book because we talk about how important it is.